Hello and welcome to Gulag. In this episode, we will focus on the relationship between American and Chinese governing elites. Though we should remember that these nations are symbolic constructs existing only in human minds, not autonomous entities with their own will. The good news is that there will be no direct military confrontation orchestrated by political leaders in Washington in Beijing in the near future. Thank God. The bad news is that both governments continue pushing ahead with a so-called decoupling process, with political and economic elites on each side feverishly seeking ways to eliminate dependence on the other in strategic sectors, such as rare earth metals and minerals on the other side, and semiconductors on the other. I would say trying to do that against will of money, because money has its own will that defies will of people. So, these policies often serve elites' interests rather than the broader population who will bear the costs, as has been true in every era when those with power pursue grand strategies while those without power face the material consequences. As long as American and Chinese population and economies remain interdependent, the ruling elite face greater constraints on pushing for military conflict. Once decoupling is complete, those constraints dissolve, making military conflict orchestrated by these leaderships only a matter of time. So this would be basically self-serving economic and political and military leadership self-serving interest against interest of their own people who benefit of cooperation following logic of money and trade, while political elites benefit from clash with the other side, in that manner kind of bringing its own subordinates into a line. The question is, what form will this elite-driven confrontation take? Will political leaders choose a third country or region for direct conflict or proxy war, as it seems they are doing right now? Or will it escalate to a final showdown between the two nuclear-armed powers? Yay, way to go. Most likely in the Pacific. A lot of dead fishes. The intertwined relationship between American and Chinese economics, built by millions of ordinary people pursuing their livelihoods and aspiration, is such that an open war across the Pacific would cause catastrophic damage to both populations, even to the citizens of whichever government emerges victorious in such a conflict, a truth that holds regardless of nationality, as suffering in war knows no borders. The role of trade and economy in conflicts between ruling elites. Through human history, those who hold power have weaponized trade and economics to advance their positions on force rival leadership groups, to recognize defeat and accept the victor's term, while those without power, regardless of nationality or era, bear the cost through unemployment, inflation, deprivation, and bloodletting. This pattern transcends any particular cultural system. British political leaders managed to create a coalition and ultimately defeat Napoleon, primarily tasked to a naval blockade of France that starved French civilians as much as it weakened Napoleon's war machine. American and Western governing classes emerged victorious from the Cold War, largely due to their economic and industrial technological superiority over Soviet leadership and the Eastern Bloc. The American national security establishment believes it has learned this lesson and wants to avoid the mistakes made by past losing governments. The Chinese Communist Party government has established control at the global level over the extraction and processing of rare earth metals and minerals, controlling resources often located in territories inhabited by ethnic minorities who see little benefits from this extraction, while American corporations and the US government dominate semiconductors. Development of advanced technology is impossible without both. Both governments have tightened control over key resources, decisions made by political elites that will shape the lives of billions. The Beijing government has introduced the new measures requiring every contract for the sale of rare earth metals and minerals to be approved by party authorities. In other words, the Chinese Communist Party has instituted export controls on rare earth metals and minerals worldwide, a policy serving the government's strategic interest, though not necessarily the interest of Chinese workers and citizens who depend on trade for their livelihood. On the other hand, the American government pressured the Netherlands, in this case the Dutch company Nexperia, one of the world's most important semiconductor manufacturers, to demonstrate alliance loyalty by having the Hague government nationalize the strategic enterprise that had fallen under Chinese corporate control. Oh gosh, that was a funny story. They managed to capture the post box of Nexperia in Holland. Well, Chinese kept all of the industry and resources that actually exist on their own soil. So that was really a Muppet show. Ah, gosh, how genius moves. Yes, so though truthfully, Dutch political and business elites had already seen through the CCP strategy of using Chinese corporations as instruments of state power to acquire know-how and technology. In Europe, not all political leaders have yet recognized the challenge posed by China's ruling party, but a significant portion of European governing classes is beginning to open their eyes, which is why, despite Trump and his anti-European administration, there has been convergence on these key sectors between political elites on both shores of the Atlantic. The economic interdependence between the two countries cut both ways. The China economy remains export-oriented, meaning the CCP government depends on foreign consumers to maintain employment and social stability, while American consumers and industries depend heavily on Chinese manufacturing and supply chains for everything from electronics to essential goods. At this time, the CCP leadership cannot afford to be cut off from American or European markets without risking unrest among Chinese workers and businesses. Similarly, American corporations and consumers would face serious disruptions if cut off from Chinese production. Chinese industries still depend on American corporations in the aviation industry and chemical sectors, which is why a direct military clash orchestrated by the two governments is unlikely in the near future. The economic pain to both populations would be immense. The Chinese government and military, on the other hand, are making major strides in shipbuilding and nuclear weapons development. In 10 years, the Chinese military will have the significantly reduced gap in nuclear arsenal and may even surpass American forces when it comes to naval fleet strength on the world oceans, all funded by Chinese taxpayers and workers, often without their meaningful input. We could add funded by American investors as well. One reason American political leaders signed a strategic agreement with South Korea government, which includes access to nuclear-powered submarines, is precisely that South Korean shipbuilding industries are among the world's leaders, and the American military establishment must keep pace with the CCP's massive fleet expansion. Also, the US government and corporate interests are actively seeking alternatives to Chinese-controlled supply chains for rare earth metals and minerals. Trump, before meeting with Xi, held a series of talks with Australian and Japanese government officials regarding the extraction and processing of rare earth metals and minerals that would in the future provide American industries and independence from Chinese Communist Party control in this area. How much credibility does the world of party authorities and the official historians carry? We can see example of Hong Kong, where the will of Hong Kong's people was subordinated to Beijing's political interests. According to the British-Chinese agreement, Hong Kong's population was supposed to enjoy autonomy under the Formula One China II systems until 2047, a promise the CCP leadership has broken to consolidate its power. The Chinese Foreign Ministry and party historians have thoroughly rewritten the history of the Second World War and adapted it to the government's political need. Yeah, well, you know. So, okay. Aha, now Russia comes in as well. CCP leadership primary goal is to achieve reunification with Taiwan, which Beijing considers an integral part of Chinese territory, stemming from the unresolved civil war. In both cases, whether it's Taiwan or potential conflict with American forces, the CCP government needs the Russian government as a very close partner, because while the two governments can never be true allies due to their geography and historical positions, they are necessary as strategic partners to each other's ruling elites. Regarding Outer Manchuria, namely the Primorsky Krai and Vladivostok, the CCP leadership is willing to let these historical grievances to go, at least until they settle account with American power. And if the Chinese military emerges victorious from their conflict with American forces, then party leaders will likely bring it to the negotiating table and revisit these treaties, that is, the relationship between Russian and Chinese governments. That's why the Kremlin doesn't want to burn all the bridges with Washington's political establishment, but rather wants to build new ones. So, this match in today's episode of Gulag, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you and goodbye.
What are you doing with your arms around Yvette?
You stupid woman! There is only one thing I could possibly be doing with my arms around Yvette. I am teaching her self-defense.